Hi, good morning. Are you hearing me?
Very clearly. So what
Okay.
time is it out there, Deniel?
It is now 7 a.m.
Oh, good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
So we're just going to wait for a couple of minutes. All right, Deniel?
No problem.
Can you see clearly what Adnab has put out for you?
He has shared the presentation with me.
That's right. That's right.
It is summers here. West Bengal is kind of rainy. It's Bangalore.
Bangalore is kind of, it's not very hot, but I just went to Chennai and came. Chennai is steaming. Isn't it, Usha? My word. And Delhi is terrible, isn't it?
Today's
Deniel, how is the Caribbeans there?
I'm sorry.
How is the how's the temperature?
It's overcast right now. We
Okay.
had a lot of rain, so we're entering rainy season.
Hmm.
Um,
Similarly there.
yeah, so the last few days we've had a lot of rain. It's rainy season / the start of the hurricane season.
Oh. So weather-wise, we are on the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is pretty hot still. Like it's very humid. The heat is intense.
Okay.
We have already seen hurricanes in the movies.
Well, I mean, I'm lucky. I live in Trinidad, and so we are a bit of a phenomenon in that we exist within the hurricane belt, but we have been lucky enough to not feel the hurricanes or have been severely impacted by major hurricanes. They seem to go straight over us and to the other islands. It's very interesting. We're literally at the edge of the belt, and so often our northern range protects us. Our sister isle, Tobago, gets hit, and then as the hurricane moves up the islands, the rest of the Caribbean will be hit. But we tend to just get rain and some severe winds, but that's it.
Wonderful. I'll just ask Saurabh one question. Saurabh, are you able to catch her accent well? Are you able to get it?
Yes.
That way, ma'am.
Huh?
Yes, I
Not in
am.
that way.
No, Daniel, I was just checking with some of the others whether they can clearly understand you. I mean, many of us can. I'm just asking one or two others just like that. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Let me know if you want me to speak slower or if faster helps.
Faster won't help. Huh? Okay. So how many people are there?
It's 32, but it's so much fun listening to one more accent after
I
live. So it is a wonderful treat.
She doesn't speak in a typical island accent because she's educated abroad and she's got her own. I mean, she speaks like any one of us. But the thing is that otherwise they've got that very, very, very. Can you speak like the islander, Deniel, for us? Oh, she's too classy. Is it what?
No. I think what you may be referring to. So when you visited, you would have gone south and Tobago, and so different parts of the island as well as Tobago, there is a different accent. So
Yeah.
you hear it coming through more strong. Like the South, persons from South have a very strong kind of heavy accent, and then also persons from Tobago have a very strong accent. I think so I'm from the north of Trinidad and Tobago, and ultimately I think in schools at the primary school level they stress understanding of grammar and so on, and so the way we speak kind of does not carry that heavy. We still sing song, apparently. That's how our accent is described, but it's not as heavy as it is in other parts of the island. also, if you listen to persons from other islands up the island chain, their accent varies. So you have the Grenadian accent, which I cannot do. You have Jamaican accents. Persons from Barbados sound very distinct as well. Um, Let me see. Persons from the French-speaking Caribbean have a very guttural accent. So it's not just that it's heavy, it's very much nasal.
So we Indians all speak alike, no difference in accent.
Yes, that is true. um,
That's a joke, Deniel. We have accents too. We all speak so differently. All right. Arnab is saying that we could begin. Arnab, please start.
all right.
So-
So good morning again.
What we'll do is we'll give Arnab his little time in the sun. Shall we?
Oh,
All
yes.
right. Go ahead, Arnab.
So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you a background. A few days back, Dr. Anuradha Balaram mentioned that there's an acquaintance, Deniel, staying in the Caribbean. We can introduce her to our team through her niche, that is gender policy and all. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Anu ma'am little bit about you, Deniel. What is the acquaintance, so that we can have a connection. And before that, I'll introduce Deniel Novella. Is from Trinidad and Tobago. He is a gender and development consultant and community organizer with an interdisciplinary and grassroots approach to social development in her place. So with this, I'll ask Anu ma'am to let us know how is this connection, and then we can form a new connection with her,
How
if
sweet.
you allow.
Thank you so much. So shall we just start with a prayer, Arnab? Would you pray for us first? Then we can, yeah.
Great. Swami Vivekananda's prayer, this is Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Deniel, this is a prayer to our youth icon of India, Swami Vivekananda. We are praying that, O Vivekananda, the representative of that Almighty God, give us strength to continue in our paths. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnab. Now, many of you have met my husband, right? Who all have met my husband? Some of you have met my husband. Now, he is, as you all know, he's traveled the whole world and all, and he likes to meet people everywhere, make friends and all that. And every time he meets people and makes friends, he'll introduce me to them. And when we get a chance, we'll actually go to that place, visit them, and so on. So a few years ago, Ajit's known Deniel for a long time. I've been speaking to Deniel a lot. My daughter knows her well and so on. But a few years ago, I actually went with Ajit to visit Deniel in Trinidad and Tobago, and we had a wonderful holiday there. And so I got to know her, and I got to see how people in the West Indies live. And you all know that we Indians right here in India were called the East Indies, right? The East Indian Company, East Indies. So East Indies and West Indies. And of course, we have a cricket connection, don't we? And so basically what happens is there's a human connection, of course. And so Deniel is going to take us through, and she's going to slowly tell us about her work. But I've told her to keep it at the very basic because she's done advanced work. Now, we can't do all that in 1 hour, right? So we're just going to get a glimmer of the West Indies and of what is the role of women there and whether they are heard. Are women heard in the West Indies? Is that clear to everybody? Are we all ready to go? Yes? All right. Deniel, the floor is yours.
All right, then. Good morning again, everyone. I hope you all can understand the accent. My name is Deniel Novella. I am from Trinidad and Tobago. I was born on the island of Trinidad and I currently live on the island of Trinidad. So I'd like to first introduce you to the Caribbean as a region. Anna, next slide, please. Yeah. So the Caribbean is this arc of islands between South and North America. We are sort of parallel to Central America. All our islands are touched by the Caribbean Sea. We do have some countries that are part of the continent, the South American continent. But the dynamic thing about the Caribbean is that we exist as a crossroad for a number of different races, ethnicities, diasporas that would have come into the region through migration from the transatlantic slave trade to indentureship. And so we are connected to peoples across the globe, from Africa to India to East Asia, South Asia, to the Europe continent, etc. Trinidad is very dynamic as it has a very unique population. In our 2011 census, the most prominent ethnicities were the Indo-Trinidadian and Afro-Trinidadian, populations, as well as a mixed population, mixed race, Indo-Afro-Trinidadian. All right, next slide. No, slide 3. This is, yeah, slide 3. So as you can see, our islands are very beautiful. Yeah, our islands, Trinidad, that is, would have been first colonized by the Spanish and then the British, formerly being joined to Tobago in 1889. So prior to this, Trinidad was actually colonized independently from Tobago. Each of the islands through the Caribbean would have had multiple colonizers and been colonized by the same entity at different points. In 1889, what happened is that the British colonized both Trinidad and Tobago at the same time. And so because of the proximity in terms of physical distance, we became a single colony. Next slide. Now, it's very interesting that Tobago has actually been colonized by more colonial entities than Trinidad. Whereas Trinidad was colonized by just the Spanish and the British, Tobago was actually colonized by the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, and the English. All right. And so you have a number of different languages and a number of different cultures, different practices, different religions, etc. Right? In the midst of that colonization, as you would be familiar, there would have been enslavement and then indenture. And through these forced migrations, we would have had bodies coming primarily from Africa and then from India to our islands. And so that is how we ended up in 2011 when we did our census with large populations of Afro-Trinidadians and Indo-Trinidadians, and of course the mixed category Afro-Indo-Trinidadian. Next slide. So here I'm just depicting the transit. So at the end of enslavement, we were introduced to indentureship, which was the British way of perpetuating labor without having to foot the bill, basically. So indentureship, we had the persons that would have been told they can come to this new space, they would get land, they would have a better life. It was essentially a con. They were lied to, they were promised that they would be able to return to their homeland. However, after coming across the Kalipani and arriving in Trinidad, the persons would have arrived at Nelson Island in 1845, and From there, they would have been brought across to Trinidad. Nelson Island is one of the tiny islands off of Trinidad and Tobago, to work on estates. Once they arrived, however, and they started working, at the end of their term, they were not taken back. They were basically told they had to work longer, longer became permanent, and so they stayed. Most people stayed, right? There isn't a large history of persons returning. So persons were forced to make their home in this new space. That meant, leaving family and friends behind. A lot of people would have come independently. So you had a majority of male persons coming into the region, hoping to make enough to send back to their families. But this, of course, did not happen. There was a small amount of women coming with the contingent. So in some 3,000 males, you would have about 100 women making the journey to the islands.
Deniel, I'll just quickly say this in Hindi. Is that okay?
Yes, that is fine.
आप लोगों ने सुना है कि पहले क्या था, ब्रिटिश लोगों ने क्या किया, हमारे लेबरर्स को यहाँ से बहुत प्रॉमिस करके हम लैंड देंगे, हम ये देंगे, वो देंगे, और 2 साल के बाद आप वापस आ सकते हैं, ऐसे ऐसे बता के कई लोगों को यहाँ से वहां ले गए. इन लोगों को इंडेंचर लेबर कहते थे. Slaves नहीं थे. Unfortunately, Africans were actually enslaved. हम लोग उतना बुरा situation नहीं था हमारा, but we were indentured labor. Is that clear, everybody? Is it clear? Indentured labor. तो हमें वहां जाके बहुत promises दिया यहाँ से, और लोग गए. तो Deniel कह रही थी कि अगर 3,000 men में 100 women जाते थे, तो इसका मतलब ये है कि मिक्स्ड रेस तो होगा ही, लोकल पॉपुलेशन से मिक्स होना ही होना था. Are you all clear here, everyone?
Yes.
All right, go ahead, Deniel.
All right, next slide, please. So as these forced migrations occurred, we would have had persons coming in, not just as bodies, but as carriers of their history, carriers of their tradition, carriers of their culture, carriers of their religion. And so with that, persons brought with them bundles, which we call jahaji bundles. And in these, they would have had spices and seeds and so on. So in our region, we now have a botanical plant life heritage, which would have taken effect because as they arrived, they planted. So they didn't just work on the sugar estates. They also kept their own gardens like they would have in India. And they would have used the seeds that they traveled with across the Kalipani to get here. They would have used their traditional ways of cooking. They would have retained some of their traditional religion. So because of this, we do have a lot of Indo traditional religions. In Trinidad, we have a lot of Indo practices. Our food, it tends to be reflective of that Asian continent, the spices that we tend to use, etc. Even in the way we speak, I don't think I sound Indian. I have a uniquely Trinidadian accent, but funny enough, I was in Jamaica for a presentation recently. And to the Jamaicans, what Trinidadians sound like is English with a hint of Indian accent to it. So they pick that up when they hear us speak, and then they recognize us as Trinidadian. That is how they recognize the Trinidadian accent, which was surprising to me. I did not know that, because to me, I don't hear that when I hear myself speak or I hear other Trinis speak. But that is how it comes through. And it makes sense because in our language, we use some Indo-Bhojpuri words, I believe. So because of where persons came from, the Bhojpuri dialect was a part of our lexicon. And by lexicon, what I mean is the type of language and the words that are spoken in our language. So it was a part of our lexicon and formed our our eventual way of communicating in terms of the version of English that we speak, because we all speak a version of English. It's not British English, it's a Caribbean version, it's a Caribbean dialect, and it is influenced by the different languages that would have been present in the island, right? So next slide, please. So here I just have some of the Indian influence in our culture. So we have the food, the cultural arts, the festivals, the religion, and even to our music, right? And it is very prominent in our culture. As I mentioned, we do have a significant Trinidadian population within the census. The split is actually about 40-40-10 or 4 or 30-30, somewhere there, where the highest concentrations are Indo-Trinidadian, Afro-Trinidadian, with some mixed race that are identify as both Indo and Afro-Trinidadian. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that in the space of, yes, you can proceed to the next slide. In the space of indentureship, we did have traditional gender roles coming forward from the Indo culture. But while this traditional gender role dictated that women were dependent on their husbands and were the docile partner in the home, there was a sort of contradiction in the indenture system, such that women were also expected to work. So Indian laborers coming to the island would also be on the estate, but yet still be expected to fill the traditional role of wife in the household as they would have back in India. Now, this became complicated, of course, when, for example, next slide, when, for example, women became the heads of their household. This image here is of Sugri. She was one of the last Indian indentured laborers to have been alive in Trinidad and Tobago. She passed away in 2012. And what is interesting about her is that she became the head of her household at 10 years old. She came to Trinidad back in 1907 with her parents, and at about 10 years old, both her parents died. And so she was now tasked with taking care of her siblings, thus becoming the head of her household and working on the plantations. Next slide. So now that we've gotten a hint of our physical body connection in terms of our transit from either India or Africa, as the case may be, albeit forced migration to the islands, I want to talk a bit about how women in general have proceeded in the Caribbean. So within the Caribbean, women have always been a part of the public space in terms of carrying the society forward. Back in indentureship, women were a part of the labor force, despite the fact that they were expected to continue their traditional roles. This persisted, and of course, as you may be aware, the traditional gender roles tend to, mirror across different cultures. So it was not just the persons coming in from India. So you would have had, moving forward, post independence across multiple islands, and even before independence, women organizing in order to carry the community forward, right? Through social work, through grassroots movements, through basic community organizing. And so they had an impact on policy in that way, whereby while they weren't recognized as the core persons working on public policy, they were able to put pressure in ways that forced policy to take action and to be changed, all right? An example of that, next slide. Yes, this one. An example of that is in Trinidad and Tobago with the early women's movement. So once upon a time in Trinidad and Tobago, corporal punishment was common in our schools. And of course, like in most places, there was an issue with domestic violence, gender-based violence, and crime. And the women's movement did a lot of research in an informal way. They would go out and talk to people. So it wasn't just reading through material as you would do in the more formalized research. They did a more qualitative study. And what they found was that we had a system of institutionalized violence that taught children to be violent. So these children would then grow up into adults who were violent and who committed violence on others. And so they decided that rather than attempt to target the symptom, that is to target the problem in the adults, the best place to target the problem was with the children, to nip it in the bud before it became a problem. And so they lobbied and organized amongst themselves and amongst other women in society to lobby against the corporal punishment in the schools, because this was what they saw as the institutionalized system of violence in school that taught children to grow into adults that were violent. And so they were successful in that their work and their lobbying allowed for shifts in policy. And so corporal punishment was actually banned in primary schools and secondary schools across Trinidad and Tobago. And not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but across the other islands, you have examples of women in the public space, but not officially in the public space. So they are not the lawmakers, they are not the policy makers, but they, through their social work and through their social action, they are able to influence policy. Next slide. Now, despite the presence of women in the public space as such, as you would have heard me mention, they have tended not to be the official policy makers. And also, despite their proven track record, women tend to still be the ones that are left out at the table. They are not the decision makers, or even if they are at the table, their issues are not brought to the table. So what happens? We end up with this blind spot where women's issues are not brought to the fore. Institutional frameworks tend to not be specific to their lived realities. Yes, women tend to not be heard. Their uncompensated work. So women tend to carry community forward through care work that is often uncompensated. Yeah, and this is excluded on an official level, unaccounted for, right? This results in a gap in terms of, next slide, please, in a gap between the public policy making space and women's lived realities. The system just does not recognize them. And this is problematic. Yeah, next slide.
Deniel, just a moment. At this stage, I'm just going to stop for a minute. Let's go back, please, Adna. Team, do you all see something similar in India? Do you feel that, Tapan, would you like to say something so that Deniel can hear what you have to say?
Certainly, ma'am. And thank you, Deniel, for this.
Louder, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, not so much. Yeah.
Just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second.
I thought, Deniel, if we hear one or two people, then you will get a, yeah. Go ahead, Tapan. Harish, yeah, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Deniel, for this lovely presentation so far. And team, आप सबके लिए हिंदी में और इंग्लिश में मिक्स करके बता दो. The story so far is so similar. I have heard this, connection between Trinidad and Bihar and all this thing from some news reports earlier, many years ago. So when you are saying the story yourself, I'm actually living it almost like, फिर से मैं देख पा रहा, I can see everything happening, your beautiful presentation, and I can imagine what troubles people might have gone through. और मैम ने जैसे पूछा, as Anu ma'am just asked, the same connection and same story, almost every part of the world probably has faced the same situation. Power struggles between, gender thing, जो आज का आपका topic भी है. Today's topic is about gender and the policy making. So the story that is evolving so far वो वही है कि कैसे समाज में उथल पुथल मचती है और फिर धीरे धीरे उसके cause and effects को समझते हुए people understand what are the root causes and they are trying to fix it at their own level. Thank you, Deniel. Anu ma'am, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tapan. He was speaking a little in Hindi so that the rest could also get it. Okay, Deniel, go ahead.
Yes.
Next. Thank you, Tapan. Next, please.
All right, next slide. Right, so this is an example of what happens when there's a gap between the public policy making and women's lived realities. In this particular example, we look at the crime and gun violence situation. Locally and globally, there is often a narrative of male-on-male urban violence when we talk about gun and gang violence. It's usually that the perpetrators and the victims are male, urban persons of a particular age group. The problem with this is that it completely invisibilizes, which means it hides the reality that women in the space also experience when it comes to violence. It hides things like, for example, women may also be victims. Women are victims in a way that men are not victims. They might be victims of trauma because they are witnessing the crime. They might be victims, for example, to heightened domestic violence because the presence of guns in a home shifts or rather intensifies the power dynamic that results in domestic violence. It also results in what we call sideline victims sometimes, where grandmothers are of persons that have been injured, wives of persons that have been injured, mothers of persons that have been injured by gun violence, now have to care for these persons or care for the children left behind when persons die from gun violence and so on. So the entire way in which women are now forced to live in communities around gun violence is silenced when we perpetuate this male-on-male violence narrative. Yeah.
Just,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, Deniel, let me ask Roshan. Roshan, can you come on, Roshan?
Yes.
Now, Roshan, now you see, do we have that much gun violence in India? Is gun violence a big, not so much, right? But do we have alcohol?
Yes.
And usually it is men who are drinking, right? Of course, women also drink, but usually it's men. But is it true that men are the only people who are suffering, or women are also suffering?
Women are also suffering, and all family members and society members are suffering.
Yeah, and men and some women are forced to work. See, what she's talking about, gun violence, is similar for us, but it's usually alcohol. Yes, Govind or Shatrupa, go ahead.
I would like to share something.
Huh.
So, Deniel and the team, I was in Bihar for 2 years when I was undergoing my post-graduation. And it was in 2016 when I took the admission. And just a year back, the government there won because they had banned the alcohol. And the voter bank was of the women. When we started going there, of course, a lot of people were annoyed with it. The men were, the alcohol was still flowing, but it was not in the open, of course. When we started discussing with the women, the aunties who used to come to our hostel or the ladies whom we used to interact with in the campus, they were all very happy with that decision. Okay? And they stated 2 reasons. The domestic violence had gone down. the children were now able to go to the schools. The children were able to study at home, and they were peacefully be able to come out of their homes and work. So it had made a huge change in their life. And even if the man in the house was annoyed at the day end, but still did not have access to alcohol, and of course the consequence after that, the consumption. So they were kind of in a big support of the decision that was taken. So we could see the change, the shift that women held there.
So Shatrupa, what happens is women in India have a voice which is higher than in some other parts of the world. Do you agree, all of you? We are still require a louder voice, but we are better off than many others. Deniel, you may please continue.
Yes. Next slide, please. Right. So I use the example of, well, the extreme example of gun and gang violence, and you all would have presented me with the example of alcohol consumption, which is also an issue here. So these are generally examples that are global, not just specific to India or to Trinidad and Tobago. But as you can see, the reality is when we do not consider the women's perspective or women's realities in particular situations, when we think through public policy making, there is an impact. Women are impacted in a very specific way. The way in which they navigate life through their traditional gender roles generally implies that they are experiencing policy in a very specific way. Now, the cost of the invisibilizing of women when we go through public policy can be very extreme. You can have, as mentioned before, their uncompensated work at that is care work that carries the community forward, is ignored. And so their specific needs to complete this work is ignored. Essential interventions fail. Someone would have mentioned that women, when the ban on alcohol was introduced, women were pleased because children can now study at home, right? This is an issue that is not unique to alcohol bans. It's an issue that can be tied to even the gun violence, because of course, one of the things that came up in our research was how security was particularly affected in terms of boundaries. So when we think through how we police these issues and how we create policies around them, we need to think through the essential services. How are people accessing these services in the midst of these insecurities that we are trying to create policy around? All right. They may result in a jeopardizing of access to something as simple as going to school. You know, in the case of, let's say, alcoholism, if it's the husband that is drinking and comes home drunk or uses the money to buy alcohol, is there money to send the children to school? Right? Next slide.
Just a minute, Deniel. Govind, just go back, please. Can you quickly say this in Hindi, Govind? The cost of invisibility. Just go back, please. No, not here. Adna? All right. If anyone else, if Govind's not ready, anyone else can. Anyone wants to tell us in Hindi what is the cost of invisibility? Have you understood, Harish?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
तो यहाँ पर डेनियल बता रही है कि the contribution of women, why it becomes invisible, मतलब लोगों को नजर क्यों नहीं आता है. तो पहला कारण है ये है कि जो कम्युनिटी को रेस करते हैं वुमेन्स, करेक्ट, आगे बढ़ाती है कम्युनिटी को, उसका ध्यान नहीं, उसको समाज में रिकॉग्निशन नहीं मिल रहा उनको. सेकेंडली, जो काम करती हैं वुमेन्स, वो उसका मैपिंग नहीं है. देयर इज नो सपोर्ट फॉर दैट, एंड रिसोर्सेज उनके लिए अलोकेट नहीं हो रहे हैं. अगेन बिकॉज ऑफ दैट, देन thirdly जो एक्सेस है, जहाँ पर पैसा जाना है वो शराब में चला जाता है वगैरह, और क्रिटिकल कम्युनिटी लाइफलाइंस जो है, जहाँ ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के लिए इस्तेमाल होना चाहिए पैसा, बच्चों को स्कूल में ले जाने के लिए पैसा जाना चाहिए, हेल्थ केयर में जाना चाहिए, वहाँ नहीं जा पाता है। एंड फाइनली जो समाज की तरफ से इनसिक्योरिटी जो है वो भी बढ़ती जा रही है। तो ये 4 मुद्दों पर डेनियल ने बात करी है।
Thank you so much, Harish. Deniel, I just want to say that in India, what's happening is sometimes at the time of elections, they tell women that, you know, you will get free transport. So they try to make the women, because women are voting in large numbers now here in India. So women are getting a little bit more but this compensation for their work and things like that, it's still in a debate, okay? Nobody is actually compensating a person who works at home. It's like a husband will come and say, what did you do all day anyway? You were just sitting at home. You know, the whole thing is being done by that lady.
Yes.
But, it's all, nobody compensates for it, nobody recognizes it. Yes, you please go ahead.
Yes. Before I go to the next slide, come back to the previous slide, please. I just want to highlight another issue, but this is to demonstrate that it doesn't just happen in the private sphere of women's existence. Anu mentioned that there are a lot of women in the workplace in India. It's the same thing here in the Caribbean. Now, despite the fact that there are so many women in the workplace, their issues are still invisible. When we think through, for example, how the state designs transportation, is your state designed for females or is it designed for males? When we think through the security experience of women, are we really including them in how we design our social space in terms of their access to public transportation, for example, in terms of how close particular transport hubs are? So for example, if a person has to go from their home at point A to their work point at point D, they have to go through stops B and C. But is it that when they take a transport from A to B, they have to walk to C and then get a transport at C to D? What happens in between B and C when they have to walk? Is it a safe space for them to walk? Even at the transport hubs, what do our transport hubs look like? Is it a building that facilitates toilet facilities that women can use? Women are often the ones taking the children to school, taking the children to daycare. Are they changing rooms for women to change the children if the child needs a diaper change? Because let's be real, a baby can't hold their self for many hours. And then that's another issue. How long does transport take in terms of time? Are we thinking through the needs of the women in society that allow for this mechanism to work? Or are we operating on a very masculine principle where it's just get to A, B, C, D, and you're there and you work? So in this way, even though it's the public space where we have women working and a lot of women working, are we still not accounting for them in that space? So I just want you to take that in mind, and as you do your work, sort of contemplate how your work may be making the lived realities of women invisible, or how it may in fact be providing solutions to account for them. Next slide. So now I want to look at, I'm doing a quick transition in terms of how we came to this knowledge as an organization. In terms of the organization that I worked with, I would have used the example of gun and gang violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is primarily because one of my focus areas in terms of research was in this area with the organization WINAD, WINAD is the Women's Institute for Alternative Development. It is the only organization in the entire Caribbean that looks at gun and gang violence as it relates to women. So while throughout the region and globally, gun and gang violence is an issue, and there are many organizations dealing with it, WINAD is the only one regionally that is intentional in terms of looking at women's perspective. To do the research, what we did was we built on a uniquely and indigenously Caribbean practice to shift from the traditional Western epistemology. So that is the way in which theory is applied to action. So that would be in terms of how knowledge is produced, codified, etc., to this indigenous practice that is uniquely Caribbean, which is what we call liming and old talk. Now, liming and old talk is unique to the Caribbean in the way in which we execute it, but it is by no means unique in terms of nowhere else in the world has a version of it. I am sure in India, you have your practices of storytelling and gathering. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, right. Liming and old talk for us is our way of storytelling and our way of gathering and coming to knowledge. It is a space of shared and relational knowledge formation, right? There's a certain reflexivity to it whereby as one person engages, another person reacts and sort of contests and challenges. And so multiple persons in this space take ownership of knowledge, deconstruct knowledge, and build knowledge. Not only knowledge, but identity. It's a space that brings us to the multiple experiences and the multiple worlds of an individual in the community. And so you can move to the next slide.
No, just a minute, Deniel. Can you will you be giving us an example in the next one moment, Deniel? Just tell them what is epistemology, please, because I just want to be sure. What is epistemology?
Right. So it is the theory behind the action. So it's the way in which and a particular way of thinking informs how we do something. So for the Western epistemology, it is the way in which they do research, that very rigid, overly formal, strict data collection that can be somewhat stringent and exclude certain information.
Right. So you're saying the Western way is more bookish and there is a certain theory base. There is it's very formal. But
yes.
The Caribbean way, and for that, like you correctly pointed out, maybe in many other parts, there are different ways of doing it. But that is getting knowledge through informal ways of sharing, understanding different perspectives, and then building a certain consensus. Is it?
Yes, correct. Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
So that's what we try to do in our work, Deniel. You'll be happy to know. We try to get perspectives and build knowledge based on that rather than anything which is in books, okay, or in some formal thing. Please go ahead. Next slide.
Thank you very much.
Ma'am, the last point new to me, participant wandered in and out of topics.
Yes. I was going to cover it with the next slide.
I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah. So the way in which these conversations, the women conversations that is occur it takes the form of a lime. So when we say liming is the action and the space is called the lime, basically. At a lime. Now, what is the lime? A lime is where people come together, they may have food, but they are talking. The persons engage freely. So unlike with the Western system where you may have an interview and you have an interviewer asking closed questions, in the space of the line, as the previous slide would have indicated, there is space to wander. Persons move from topic to topic with a more gentle guide from the facilitators who are equally invested and are on the same level and are part of the line, also limers within the space, contributing equally, engaging equally, contesting equally, building knowledge equally. So for example, Anu and I are talking, and let's say we are talking about beliefs, religious beliefs, and Anu explains something and I respond, and then she explains something again, and the conversation moves from religion to morality very organically, but the information is there, and it's a rich exchange of knowledge. Yeah, so that's what happens in the space of the line. There is also this sense of safety and trust that is built because it is a familiar space. It is a casual space. It is a space that is translatable to home. It is where we can be ourselves and we can speak freely and we can speak authentically. You know, Trevor Noah, if I'm not sure if you're familiar with the comedian Trevor Noah. He is a South African comedian based in the US. He has said that it is interesting that what is sometimes interpreted as racism is often an inability to communicate because we are not speaking each other's language. There is a very important reality when it comes to being able to communicate with another person through their way of communicating. It's you making space for their authentic self. In the space of the line, we are making space for the other's authentic self. In, for example, the space of this conversation, even though I'm speaking English and everyone can understand me, there are points where, for example, Anu or someone else may speak in Hindi because that is your authentic way of understanding knowledge. So hearing it within your own tongue is particularly important. Yeah. This speaks to your sense of voice. And so with that, you can present your truths more authentically. You feel more agentic, as in you have the autonomy, the control, the authority to speak your reality into being. Yeah. So that deals with the voice and agency. It's intersubjectivity. The researcher doesn't hold a status, as I mentioned before. It is not a top-down way of proceeding. It is not the what we call the bank model, where a researcher comes in to what's the word I'm looking for? To withdraw information and owns the information. It is not a teacher coming to lecture at the head of a class. It is everyone engaging and talking and exchanging knowledge and building knowledge together in a very cooperative way. All right. So it also has a way of capturing the things that you would not capture in an interview, the things you would not capture in a questionnaire, because of the nature of the space, the way in which the space is free. Some of the hidden things are unearthed in that space. And so we say it's the little key that opens very mighty doors. Yeah. And so I will start closing with this. Next slide, please. To end by...
There are a couple of questions here, Deniel.
Sure.
Where is Lime operating in society? Is it in schools, colleges, cafes?
So that's the beautiful thing. In the Caribbean culture, a Lime happens everywhere and anywhere. And across all categories. So you may have children at school liming, but then you may also have the intergenerational lime with the grandparents and the parents and the children on a Sunday afternoon, relaxing together in the backyard. As well as you have the adult limes where the adults are, forgive my example, at a rum shop, unfortunately. But at the same time, the quality of conversation is such that there is always a rich exchange of knowledge. Sometimes, actually, I want to give this example. At the conference that I was at recently in Jamaica, I went to one of the panels. It was a panel on Creole. Creole is one of the Caribbean languages. It is a dialectic language in that it is what was once considered a broken form of another language. And the particular panelist was speaking about the challenges to her research. One of the challenges that she encountered was that she could not find the information that she was looking for at the time. She was doing research in Grenada. She was on one of the smaller Grenadine islands that is governed by Grenada called Carriacou. And she was going to the academy to look for the data that she was seeking, only to realize that the academy did not contain it. By accident, she went to Lime at a rum shop, and lo and behold, at the rum shop, she is hearing the Creole spoken. And so it was in the space of the rum shop and in the space of the Lime, she was able to actually collect data on the existence of Creole and Creole language use in Carriacou and build her research from there. And so she realized that for her to gather the data, the people she had to talk to was not in the academy. It was not contained in the books at the academy. She had to go to the rum shop and talk to the old people just sitting, relaxing, liming, and talking in Creole. Yeah? Does that answer the question?
Adam, it's like
Yes.
the Adda system, no? Basically sitting around and talking.
Yes.
So
Discuss-
one small thing. What do you call lime in the Caribbean dialect? Any word for that, Deniel?
Yeah. This is in the American parlance.
Yes.
It's simply known as hanging out.
Okay.
In some other islands, for example, well, not island. This is a Caribbean country that's continental in Guyana. They gab. That's the old talk. What we call old talk is known as gabbing or gaffing, or you're having a gaff is the same as you're having a lime.
So the schools follow this lime system, or is it a mix of top-down and liming?
So liming is not formal in any sense of any way. So during, for example, a school break time, like a lunchtime or a recess, you will have groups of students organically coming together to lime in a very unofficial capacity. Students just, grouping in their, for lack of a better term, cliques and talking with each other is a form of liming. So what Winard would have done is recognize that within this space there is knowledge, and knowledge is not just present, but being contested, created, recreated, deconstructed, etc., and use the space to collect the data that we wanted.
One last query. Do we have fights or gangs in this culture?
If we have fights or gangs?
Yeah.
So
based on lines.
not
Lime
based
groups.
on the lime exactly. Fighting and gang culture exists in general, because with the Caribbean region being that transatlantic shipment route, guns come into the region, and all of the issues surrounding guns come with them. So whether it's protection issues, drug issues, etc., they accompany the guns, and there is a presence of gangs in communities as well as such that are related to the guns. So in that way, you have guns. You have gangs. Do gangs lime? Gangs also lime, because it's a way in which our people come together and engage with each other across all classes, across all economics, across all statuses. It is our way of being. Even within the gang culture in a line, you have a bed for information. You have a bed of knowledge. It is an exchange of knowledge. Does a lime create a gang? No. The lime is not the vehicle through which gangs are operational. It is simply the vehicle through which knowledge is passed on, contested, as I said before. So it's a communication device more than anything else that is used across all relations, whether it is in the schoolyard, the workplace, because even in the workplace, let's say you have a common lunch hour with your co-workers. You may have your lunch and then you go outside and you lime for the rest of your work hour. It is a way to relax and just, let go of your thoughts in a way that allows for shared carrying. So in the space, for example, of the women's conversation version of the lime, one of the things that occurred, and this also builds the safety of the space, the strength of the space, is that women were able to share issues, common stresses that they may have and they may have experienced, and carry it with each other in a way that doesn't remove the burden and doesn't make it less, but lightens the load for the women themselves. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, ma'am.
We'll go to the next slide because the time is running up.
Yeah. So ultimately, why I'm ending here now is because you've had an idea of our connection, how we are essentially shared in terms of our humanity, our biological connection, our ancestry and heritage. And you would have seen how even in this space that is removed from you in terms of distance, there is a commonality in terms of the way women's subjectivities are heard in society and in the space of public policy making. Yes, you may have the presence of women, but are there issues really being heard? All right. You've also seen that you also have the situation where while women may not necessarily be heard on some issues, they still hold some amount of power to influence policies through their social action, the social work, the social organizing, etc. You've seen how, for the case of Trinidad and Tobago and the specific case of the gun and gang violence research by Winard, we've operationalized a specifically Caribbean way of being to gather data in a way that is not the West. It's not opposed to Western theory, but it is another way that is valued for us because we recognize that it has the data that we need. It's an informal way, it's a traditional way of understanding, and it is distinctly non-Western. And so I want to close with saying that the inclusion of women in security policy, in transport policy, in all forms of public policy is not just about having women in this space. It's not on an add women and stir. We're not cooking. It's about featuring their subjectivities. It's an epistemological necessity because we need to understand their lived reality. By grounding itself in a very uniquely Caribbean and very indigenously Caribbean methodology, that's liming, and also we have been able to situate the experiences of women as a valid knowledge production source. So for you, it may be the space of your family prayer. What happens when you go through your family prayer? It may be that there is an exchange of not only prayer, but moral values that facilitate knowledge being passed on. And in this space, there is understanding, there is ways of being that can inform your public space. Yeah, so I will close with that.
Deniel, do you have another 5-10 minutes?
Yes.
All right. So would anyone who has questions can put it on the chat box, and she can choose to answer anything that she wants to. Would that work for all of us? If anyone has a question, they can put it on the chat box. That will give Deniel time to look at it. Deniel, you can see the chat box, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can.
So if anyone wants to, they can see. For example, Sumana is asking, do religious heads sit and lime with the general people?
Sometimes yes, and
Yeah.
sometimes they lime among themselves. So, for example, after a wedding, right? Whether it's a Catholic wedding, Hindu wedding, actually more often than not, it's at the Hindu wedding. You have this space where food is shared after the ceremony, and you have either the priest, the pundits, or whoever sitting among the family and talking and liming.
Actually,
The next,
can I just tell a point? Actually, I
yes.
was asking this question just because, as you said, gun is very big part of maybe that society. So maybe if religious heads, they sit with the younger generation, younger people, and sit with them, talk, I mean, liming them. So maybe they can be little diverted from that. That is why actually I was aiming to ask. Thank you so much.
No problem. I wanna, I think I may have misrepresented the level of violence in focusing on gun and gang violence. So I want to just be clear in saying it is not that we have an exceedingly high gun and gang violence, it's that it is present. And so the fact that while it is present, it was not being dealt with comprehensively, Winard took it upon itself to engage with that particular element of society. And I work with Winard, so this is a core research item for me. It is not that it's a major issue. It's one of the issues, one of the I think they call it a level 1 crime because it deals with murder and rape and so on. So that is why I had such a heavy focus on gun and gang violence. But there are also other areas that this is relevant to. Like, for example, we would have engaged in terms of the transportation policy. We would have engaged, someone raised the idea of bans on alcohol and so on. And those are also other elements. So I want you to keep that in mind. I saw another question. Let me just get to it. What kind of work do women have access to? Is it teaching, nursing, and are there women doctors? Yes. So in the Caribbean, women have access to just as many jobs. Will they be selected for the job is a different story, because as it is globally, there is still the glass ceiling. And another issue that occurs is that how women come into jobs. So if you look at our universities, for example, and you look at the sex disaggregated data in terms of who is pursuing what, you do have a lot of women, in some cases, a majority of women completing programs across the board, across the medical sciences, engineering, the hard sciences, so math, phys, chem, bio, computer science, the social sciences, so teaching, humanities, social sciences, etc. Oftentimes, however, in specific spaces, you still have that gender gap in terms of who is hired, and also, sorry, also the rate at which, in terms of the salary rate, people are paid in terms of the hires. You have women that tend to come into particular jobs at lower salary rates than men. So their caps are, in terms of the highest salary they can attain over time, is lower than men. There are jobs that tend to exclude men more than women. For example, even though there are men in the teaching service, you would find more women applying to the teaching service. And that is not just by default of women like teaching, but socially, the tradition is that that is the rule that falls to women. The next.
What we're going to do is that if at all anyone has any questions, they will send it to Arnab, and we will get it all and we'll send it to you, and later on we'll share it with them.
Okay, no.
We know it's early morning for you, just gotten up, and also some others will have to travel and all that. So if anyone would like to thank Deniel, how do you all feel having a person from across so many hours, so many...
It was a joy, number one.
You like it?
And oh yes, ma'am. Similar sessions, if Deniel and others, Anu ma'am, if it is possible. It's a great opportunity. Anu ma'am, I thank you, and Deniel, is such a marvelous effort that you have given us. But I would, as Anu ma'am is saying, would request my team to express a few words for Deniel. It will make her day. Yes.
Anyone wants to say anything to Deniel?
Can I, ma'am?
Yes.
Actually, Deniel, ma'am, I really love this session of yours. In fact, I don't know whether V.S. Naipaul, the great literary giant, was from Trinidad and Tobago. When I first read him, today's your session was a complete recap of those entire stories of his. Beautiful. When I read Miguel Street, his novel, wonderful novel, the pain, the difficulties, everything, the struggle of Caribbean people, everything brought to life once again, ma'am. His House for Mr. Biswas, everything. How nicely he narrated entire Caribbean picture. And today I am meeting you in person, albeit it is online. It's a great thing, ma'am. In fact, when I read V.S. Naipaul, I could connect the struggle of Caribbean people with our Indian struggle. The same story, the same story. So it's a wonderful having this session of yours, ma'am. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm very happy to hear that you connected in that way. Thank you very much.
Sashwati, go ahead.
Yes, I am so want to thank you. The presentation you have made, it really touched, and all the things you covered so nicely. That is really, we are very thankful to you. Thank you for
so
your
much.
given.
Thank you so much.
I would like to have a lime session.
Yeah.
You can have a lime online, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, Avantika, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for the session, ma'am. What I could understand from this discussion, that stories across the world are very similar. It's just a little flavor here and there. But basically, I think the struggles that we all go through is similar in most part of the world. And it's how we navigate through them is what is most important. And I believe that by sharing these stories, these snippets, we get courage from each other, and it makes us, feel good, and also uh, feel like, there are others who can support us in our times when we are low or something, because of these shared stories. So thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is exactly the point within our stories.
So who's going to invite Deniel to India?
I am ready to jump on that plane.
Deniel, I stay in Howrah near Kolkata. So
You can come and
Deniel,
learn.
Deniel, we live nearby airport, so you come to our place. It's Delhi airport, near to Delhi airport.
So from here, you can go anywhere, to Howrah, to Bangalore,
So there will
Mumbai.
be easy access.
I love this. Thank you very much.
She'll come soon. Once she comes, then we'll see. So
We'll just like to say a couple of things. So Daniel, it was a beautiful presentation. We were looking at all the illustrations and all, very attractive. And during my course and all, I read about the chutney music. So I was kind of looking forward to hearing about it maybe some other time. Because the placement of women is extremely close to the cultural development of any place, because it's the food, it's the stories, and it's all weaved around women and liming, of course, like you said. And so thank you for that. And just on a lighter note, we both were here, we're quite distracted by whatever is going on in the background.
Oh, I do apologize. My dogs. Yes, I'm sorry.
Just on the screen. So we were wondering that which series or whatever TV, whatever is going on, what is it?
Oh, I have no idea. I have a habit of just having something running in my background. It's
white
like
noise.
White noise.
Beautiful.
So anyhow, thank you once again.
Yes,
Thank
you
you,
are
Anu.
most welcome. Anu, I absolutely love that she raised the chutney music and so on. Maybe we can do another session where this might be a liming session, a virtual lime, where we talk through some of the inherited culture that Trinidad has from our Indian ancestry, which would include not only the religious practices, but also the music, such as chutney. Chutney is a blend of Indian music and soca, calypso, for example, and it's amazing. So I would love to do a session like that, to show or share how we've retained some of our ancestral culture, the Mehndi drawings and so on your palms during Diwali and all of that. And when you keep prayers, what that is like and so on. Even our styles of cooking has been retained.
So Deniel, thank you so much. We'll meet again for sure.
Sure.
And we loved having you.
Thank you
for
very much.
joining.
One thing, Anna, there are a few questions in the chat that I would not have read. I don't know if you want to copy them and paste them into a document. So when you send me the other questions that anyone may share with you subsequently, you can include those as well. I'd love to answer all of them,
Yeah, I'll just copy them. Anu ma'am, shall we close with a pranam mantra?
You go ahead.
So, Deniel, Sharda Devi, the spiritual Vivekananda spiritual guru's wife, we generally pray to her to end anything. So we'll do that. Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagat Gurum Pada Padme Tvayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmu. Deniel, have a nice day. We'll meet again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel.
Have a good
Thank you so much, Deniel.